We'll be recording this meeting for future use. No one has a problem. No one's in the, what is that, witness protection program we don't need to worry too much about. So anyway, we want to welcome everybody out today. Today's our first one of this year. We're hoping that 2021 is better than 2020. However, we did get snow this year, where last year we didn't. So we're already on a downhill slide. But we want to thank everybody for joining us today. Today, our guest speaker is Mary Foy from Proxy Clean. Boy, I almost blew that, Mary. I'm sorry. And Mary and I were trying to decide, when did we first meet? It's been about 12 years ago. We met we were both working at Arkansas in the same lab. We worked for people that shared a lab. That it was always a fun time, and it was where we met. So it's been 12 years ago, because about 10 years ago is when I left, and it'd been a year or two. So anyway, Mary is the technical director, if I remember right, for Proxy Clean. I want to say that right. I don't have anything written down. You're a friend, so we don't worry about that. But anyway, today Mary's going to talk to us about minerals and water. And Mary, if you want to go ahead and share your screen and get started, we'd appreciate it.
All right. Let's see if we can do that.
There's Maureen.
Back that up a little bit. Okay, thank you so much to the University of Maryland and the University of Delaware's Extension Service for asking me to speak. And thank you to those that have taken the time to learn a little bit more about their water and join us today. So I'm just going to jump right on into it. We talk a lot about the buildup in our water lines and getting those water lines clean, but part of that buildup can be minerals. And sometimes we tend to ignore them because we don't know what minerals are. We don't know what they do. And if we know they're there, we don't know what to do about them. So I'm going to try to cover some of that in this talk. And hopefully by the end of this, you got a little better idea of what to do with mineral scale that may be building up in your water lines. So when it comes to the minerals, sometimes you see them and sometimes you don't. It kind of depends on which minerals that you've got coming into the system. There we go. Minerals come from the water's contact. Where is it coming from in the first place? It comes from the water's contact with the surrounding geological features. They can be introduced from an underground reservoir, or they can come from porous geological formations that allow water to move underground. They can also be introduced from the surface as rainwater leaches down through the soil to a shallow well. And I know in the Delmarva area, there are a lot of shallow wells. And when we say a shallow well for leaching from the surface, I'm talking about a well that is less than 100 feet. So what are those minerals doing to my birds, and how is it affecting the performance of them? It can have a negative impact on your bird health. Minerals are also a food source for organisms in the water line. So there are bacteria that can live on the minerals themselves. And those minerals build up as a scale in the water line. It causes, and that scale can cause your equipment to function inefficiently, and also hides organisms from the water treatment that you're putting into the water. So we're talking about the performance on our birds and how those minerals can impact their performance and their bird health. I tend to have people ask themselves questions about what is happening with your birds right now. Are they flushing? Do you have wet floors because your birds are flushing? Well, that's a place to start looking for minerals. Magnesium can cause that. Sodium and chlorides, which is salt, that can cause your birds to flush. Sulfur can cause your birds to flush. And we have lots of sulfur wells in our country. So if you've got a sulfur well, there's a good chance it's causing your birds to flush. Minerals and the negative impact on bird health, some more things that it does. The decreased consumption of feed and water. Maybe they're not drinking as much as they could be because of the way the minerals are making the water taste. Zinc is one of them that does that. It tastes astringent. You cannot see zinc, perfectly clear. Iron is another one. If you have a lot of iron in the water system, the water can taste bitter. And copper is another one. If there's copper, it also can taste bitter. One little thing I do want to say about iron, we know what iron looks like. It shows up orange on those filters. It shows up as orange scale in those water lines. We've all seen it, and we know when we've got an iron well. Well, iron comes in a couple of different forms, and one of those forms can be its dissolved form, where it is clear in the water, and you don't know it's there until it becomes oxidized, until it gets on down into the water line and starts settling into the pipes itself. Or maybe it doesn't get oxidized at all, and you just have a lot of iron in there that may cause the water to taste bitter, and you're not really seeing it because it's not building up on the filters. So just keep in mind that just because it's not orange doesn't mean that you don't have iron in the water. Another negative impact is, and this is more for people who keep animals for a longer period of time. So if you've got animals in the barn, breeders sometimes can be affected by these minerals, but a lot of swine is affected by these as well. But poor growth, weak bones, intestinal irritation can all be caused by nitrates, lead, and copper. And a lot of times we don't see, especially the lead, I don't see that as often anymore. That's usually an older farm that has an underground pipe that was done with lead. But nitrates can happen in the well and move up into the water lines and impact bird health and bird growth. So let's talk about those shallow wells for just a little bit, because I know there's a lot out there that have these. So again, I'll reiterate, a shallow well is considered less than 100 feet. It is easily influenced by rainwater, flooding, and drought. So rainwater and flooding bring in contaminants that leaches through the soil. Rock formations bring in varying amounts of mineral levels. And then drought on the other side of that can cause a pump to pull up heavy minerals that may have settled to the bottom of the water source. Also, these shallow wells often have more turbidity, which is just cloudy water due to suspended particles. This turbidity in the water, it ties up the chemicals that you may have chosen to treat the water. And those same particles that are causing that turbidity often settle out into the functioning part of the drinkers and jam them open and shut. So this is just a cross-section of a typical drinker, a short time drinker, and you can see everywhere that those minerals can settle into, all those little crooks and crannies, and jam that drinker open or shut. And back to iron, it seems to be a big culprit for us. It has a double edge, because not only does it taste bitter, and it builds up a lot of scale in those water lines when it's in the oxidized form, but it is a great source of food for bacteria. And notoriously, E. coli loves iron. So a lot of times I've got farms that they have this iron problem, which is a big mineral issue, which we have to deal with. And then on top of that, they have a bacteria problem because the bacteria are living off of the iron. So most of the bacteria that live off of that iron produce a lot of slime, and that can build in your pressure tanks and filters and your pressure reducing screens. A lot of slime buildup comes from the bacteria that break down this iron. So there's actually several minerals that bacteria can live off of. Iron is not the only one, but iron is the one that we see the most just because it's so prevalent in our wells. Some of those other minerals, manganese can be an issue. It's not really a problem for the birds, but it's black and grainy, and it shows up on those filters, and it can jam our drinkers shut pretty easily. Bacteria do use it as a food source as well. Hardness, a lot of people talk about the hardness of their water. What is that? It's the combination of calcium and magnesium. And this hardness causes scale, and that scale can hide bacteria. So it also seals drinkers shut and reduces pipe volume. So that's where hardness becomes a problem. Silica is something that I have seen on the shore, and I bring it up because even though it is in solution and we can't always see it, if you get a pH drop and a temperature drop, it will fall out of solution. So I've had growers that have been going along just fine. Their water's never given them any trouble. And then they start lowering that pH, and we get to January And all of a sudden they've got this gunk that's built up over here on the side of the slide. You can see the gunk that's built up in that Plasson. It's because they dropped the pH, it got cold, and silica fell out of solution of the water and clogged up their drinkers. So let's talk about scale, which is one of the main things that minerals do inside our water lines, is build up that scale, and that's how we see it. We've all seen how scale impacts those drinkers. We've probably all had some drinkers seal over and have to get those cleaned up. It also, if it's sealing over those drinkers, it is building inside those water lines. And it means it can build up not only in the water lines, it can build up in the regulators, and it builds up in those underground lines. So if you've got drinkers that have sealed over and they're starting to stick because you know they've got scale on them, keep in mind that not only those drinkers have to be cleaned, but you've really got to stay on top of the drinker lines themselves and the underground lines. They're getting a buildup too. So what is scale? Well, scale is that mineral buildup that attaches itself to the inside of our pipes and our drinkers and our regulators. It can also hide communities of bacteria, yeast, mold, fungus, algae, and viruses. So if you just look at all the crooks and crannies that they can hide in and under, that makes it a more visible sign of how hard it is to get that water treatment to them. So when we've got scale in there, we may be treating our water and thinking that we're doing a good job treating our water, but the bacteria and the viruses and the fungus and yeast and molds, all those organisms can get underneath this scale and hide in there and live to see another day. So we've got to get rid of the scale when we're cleaning water lines. Also, if you've used a lot of acids, it can cause pits in the rubber components of the drinker systems. I know that some of us have rubber hoses that drop down from the ceiling to our regulators. And inside those rubber hoses, you can get pitting, and you can get a lot of scale buildup inside those too. So we recommend that even if you're cleaning those rubber hoses as part of your cleaning routine, keep an eye on those. Those need to be changed out. Every few years, it's a good idea to look at those and see if they need to be changed out. So I've talked about all the horrors of what minerals can do in our water lines and how they can affect our bird health, how they can build in our water lines, can build the scale up, and how they hide the bacteria that's in there. So what can you do about that? Well, there are lots of things that you can do about this. Do you need more filtration? That's the very basic place to start. In the corner on the left-hand side, down in the lower left-hand corner, I try to always use this little example over here. It's a good way to judge if you think you need more filtration. So the filter that is white on the far left, if after a couple of weeks of water flow, if your filter looks like that, then you are probably doing just fine. If that filter in the middle is what it looks like after a couple of weeks of water flow, you probably just need to change the filter. You could do a little bit more, but changing the filter may be enough to keep it under control. If your filter looks like the third filter in that picture, you absolutely need more filtration. It's just too much for the system to keep up with. And so what does that mean? What is more filtration? Well, I'm not a filtration expert. So you would need to refer to someone that knows their filtration, but there are things like just a bigger filter. That's a farm guard up on the upper right-hand corner. It just takes on the larger particles before it gets to your smaller filter in the ante room. You can do a sand filter, which a lot of people have on older farms. I grew up with a sand filter because we drank our water from the well also. And so we were changing out that sand once a year. We change that sand out. That's a great way to go. Activated carbon filters, mixed media filters. It just depends on what your minerals are as to what filter is going to work the best for you. But there is something you can do about it. So don't think you're just beat because you've got lots of minerals in your system. There are other ways to deal with it. So a lot of people ask me about chemical treatment and filtration, which is a great way to go. There are lots of minerals that can be oxidized, is what we call it. What that really means is that we're adding an oxidizer to the system, such as a hydrogen peroxide or a chlorine, and it's going to make the molecules of minerals bigger, so to speak, so that they're more easily caught in the filters. And then the filters can remove more minerals from the water because it's a bigger molecule. To do this, you would chemically treat the water with an oxidizer, such as a hydrogen peroxide or a chlorine, as I mentioned, make that molecule bigger, and then run that water through a filter. The trick with this is that the filter is going to fill up a lot faster than what you're used to if you do it this way. So you have got to stay on top of making sure that filter stays clean, or getting a different kind of filtration system, since it is going to be catching a lot more of the minerals that are coming out of this, out of the well. So then I have people ask me about minerals and acids. A lot of people who have minerals in their, that are coming from their source, add acid to the water. So unlike oxidizers, which I just talked about, which is like a chlorine or a hydrogen peroxide, acids keep the minerals in solution. So that's different. The oxidizers make them big, you can filter them out. The acids keep them in solution so they don't fall out of solution. So you can add an acid to the drinking water to keep minerals in solution and prevent them from building up as much scale as they would have without the acid. This one is not as good a fix though. This one, the acids can only get so much in solution, and sometimes you already have a low pH in your water, and so you don't want to add a pH to it to make the water, to drop the pH any lower. So this one is more of a temporary fix, or one of those that if you just have a little bit of mineral in your system, you can add some acids to it to keep it in solution. Acids also don't work. They don't keep all minerals in solution. So this is just for a select group of minerals that they actually will keep in solution. I do want to say this about minerals and acid. There can be serious consequences for depending only on acids for this purpose. I understand that we use acids to lower pH for bird health. I would not, just a heads up, continuous use of acids, especially acids that contain chlorides or chlorine. Many do, so read their labels, read their SDS sheet. You're looking for hydrochloric acid. That can damage equipment, including rubber and stainless steel components in the water system, especially if you're using them in conjunction with chlorine-based products. So many waterline manufacturers void the warranty if there's long-term use of these acids that have chlorides or chlorine, or if you use it in conjunction with chlorine. So usually anything long-term below a pH of 6 is what they are very cautious. They want you to be very cautious about that. Also, when using acids to get minerals into solution, the water does reach a saturation point where acids are no longer able to keep those minerals in solution. So again, if you've got a lot of minerals going on in the system, it is better to look for a filtration system or to oxidize the minerals first, put them through a filter, and remove the minerals that way. That's the safer way to do that. So let's say that you've already got a mineral scale built up in those water lines and you want to get rid of that scale, but you don't know how to do that. It is really very easy. After you have cleaned the organics out of the line, so get all that gunky stuff out with an actual line cleaner. You can follow that with an equipment-friendly acid. Again, one that does not contain chlorides or chlorine. There are phosphoric acids on the market that can do this, and those are the ones that we recommend that you put into the water line to descale. Once you've got that acid in there, go through and trigger those drinkers, because remember how those drinkers seal over, those minerals build up in there, and all those crooks and crannies that we saw in the diagram, you want to make sure you've got acids down into those crooks and crannies to clean out those minerals. Your goal is to get the pH in the water below 4. So shoot for below 4, allow it to sit for 24 hours, and then come back through with fresh water, trigger those drinkers again. So you're getting the acid out of those drinkers, and you're ready to roll. This is another before, just showing you some before and afters on what descaling those water lines will actually do. And we just wanted to show a demo of what it looks like. All we did was take a cut piece of water line that was filled up with iron and minerals. We dropped it into a solution that had a pH of 4. We left it overnight, and the next day we took it out. And so that's how well it can work to descale your water lines. Here's a little tip, especially if you're using a phosphoric-based acid, you can clean and reuse some of those filters. So we have learned to make a 10% solution of a phosphoric-based acid. We soak the filter overnight and they come out clean. I always tell people, ask the manufacturer if this is safe. Some phosphoric acids also have other acids added to it, like the hydrochloric acid. So you want to make sure that it's just a phosphoric acid that you're doing this with. But this is what we come out with, and we can reuse that filter. So there's a little handy hint there. And mineral tests. So if you don't know anything else about your water, a great place to start, other than just what builds on that filter, a great place to start is a mineral test. It is really easy to collect these and ship these. These are different than a bacteria test. Bacteria tests, you know, people will tell you, you got to refrigerate it and you got to do a sterile sample, and there's all kinds of steps to bacteria tests. But mineral tests are super easy. You can collect it in a clean container, even a water bottle, an empty water bottle that you've used. Try to collect from a faucet that's close to the source. After the water has been running for a few minutes to activate the pump, that's when you want to collect your sample. And we suggest that you do it once every 5 years for wells that are over 100 feet deep. So the deeper wells don't change as often. And shallow wells, it's recommended that you do a minerals test at least once a year because they are influenced by so much more that's happening on the surface. Like I said, doesn't require a sterile sample or refrigeration. And it doesn't have to be expensive. Ask around. Several of the universities do it. Some of the extension co-op offices do it. And they range anywhere. I know the University of Arkansas does it for about $21. A typical mineral test at an extension service or a co-op is usually 40 or 50 bucks. Beware that you don't have to pay that much for a mineral test. And when you get that test back, there are actually measurable limits for poultry water. University of Arkansas has set up a chart showing you what the average levels are and what the maximum levels are. And when they've got the maximum levels, there are things that we can do about that. So I don't expect you to memorize this chart or take notes down real quick. We have this chart available. It can be shared with you, or you're welcome to call your extension service or me, and I can walk you through a test result. A lot of times I know I run into people who have had mineral tests done, and they don't know what it means. They got it back. It's been sitting in a drawer for 2 years, and it didn't help them at all because they don't understand what the limits are, what they can do about it. So we're glad to help you walk through that and give you solutions to what's on those mineral tests. So this is a quick one. I am actually finished, and there's my contact information. Again, I'm glad to help you through some of these. Obviously I work for Proxy Clean, but I work on all kinds of stuff. It doesn't matter if you use Proxy Clean or not. I'm glad to help people just try to get their water in a better shape and solve some of those mineral issues and bacteria issues, and try to guide you on that. So thank you all so much for listening, and I will hand it back over to the extension groups.
Hey, Mary, thank you so much. That was really good. And just for those that know, we will share that chart out as well, because we'll share some of that with them, because you're right. Trying to remember that chart every time somebody says, "What is this?" I've got to go find the chart. It's like, I know this, but I don't remember it. So again, but we do have some time for questions. If anybody is on that wants to ask a question, we would more than welcome to speak up now. You can unmute yourself and ask.
John, we have a question. Mary, do you recommend treating wells? If you won't put anything in the chat, we'll monitor the chat also.
Yeah, so when it comes to wells, I am not a fan of shock treating a well, because if once you mess that flora up, that bacterial flora up, whatever gets hold to grow in that well first is what will dominate the bacteria in that well from then on. But I do realize that with some of these mineral tests that we do, and I had a farm last Thursday that we had to walk through. They had high bacteria counts, they had lots of coliforms and E. coli in their well, and they needed to shock their well. There are absolutely ways to do that, to safely shock your well. There is a product I like called Well Safe. You can order it on Amazon. You can get it from Walmart, and a lot of the our agricultural distribution groups, they have it. It comes with full instructions. It comes with tablets that are pre-measured for the particular kind of chlorine that you need to use to shock the well. And they even have a YouTube video to show you step-by-step how to shock that well.
Like those videos.
Yeah, I know. I'm a visual person for sure.
That's right. It's easier to follow.
Yeah.
Oh, Mary Lou's got her hand up.
I think that was Mary Lou's.
It was Mary, yeah.
All
Okay.
right. And
Ernie.
Ernie's got his hand up. Ernie, can you unmute?
There we go.
There you go.
I just did. So here's my question. What's your opinion of from starting at the well, pre-filtration treatment, such as softening and I'm talking specifically deep wells, 240, 240 to 280, and then post-filtration, then introduction of a chlorine or a Proxy Clean and things of that nature. What's your opinion of that?
Yeah, so I usually like, when you talk about a water softener, I realize that some people just have to use a water softener to keep it under control. I have a heads up on that. If you're using a water softener, please, please, please make sure that on down into the line, you are using some kind of chemical treatment that is a chlorine or a hydrogen peroxide. The water softeners are great for removing those heavy minerals, but there are a couple of vicious bacteria that survive that salt water, that salt environment. And when they get into the system, they are really hard to kill. So you want to stay on top of water treatment if you're using that. We have actually traced, I had a group in Tennessee that they used water softener. You know, it's Tennessee, so it's limestone everywhere. And they used a lot of water softeners on their farms, and they kept having trouble with bone development with their birds. And we actually traced the bacteria that was growing in their bones back in through the system and at the water softener that was causing their problem. So please stay on top of it if you do that. So, and then on down the line, I actually recommend, go ahead.
Well, I have a secondary onto this, and that is one of the things that we like to do is we like to keep bacteria guessing. I don't like to use just one because they can develop. My understanding is that I understand this is more toward mineral, but bacteria also are a factor, and they can develop a tolerance, if you will. So I like to switch it up on them, keep them guessing, so therefore they don't build up in lines. I'm a fairly new operation. I've been in operation for 2 years, and our setup is pre-filtration, softening, post-filtration, and then treatment. We use Proxy Clean. Initially, we start off and we use that for several weeks. Then we switch over to a chlorine dioxide for a few weeks, and then we finish them with Proxy Clean. And that because we're trying to make sure that we maintain line sanitation, but in additionally, we like to keep bacteria guessing. What's your opinion of that approach?
Yeah, that's a great idea. There are hundreds of bacteria that we work with that develop resistance to the chlorine products. They are less likely to develop resistant to chlorine dioxide or chlorine gas. It's the liquid chlorine that they develop a resistance to real quick. But chlorine dioxide is a decent one to use. Chlorine gas is a decent one to use. And then hydrogen peroxide, we have not seen any resistance to hydrogen peroxide just because it acts in a different way on the cell wall of the bacteria. It doesn't give them much of an opportunity to develop a resistance. So I think you're spot on for staying on top of it and giving a rotation every now and then of any of the chlorine products, especially just rotate it out every now and then to keep those bacteria on their toes.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thanks. Great questions. I appreciate it.
Mary, there's another question. What do you think about ozone device water treatments?
Okay, so ozone, I actually worked on that at the University of Arkansas. We had somebody working on a master's degree with that. And the ozone itself works really great. If it's done properly, if you keep up with the equipment itself, it works fairly well. The problem is that the ones that I have seen on the market, you really got to stay on top and make sure the equipment is working. But the main problem with this is that for what's coming into the system, it could be a good solution. But you got to remember that there's no residual with ozone. When it goes out, once it's treated, it's done. And when it goes out into the barn itself, where the birds are getting drinks of water and where they're hitting those drinkers over and over and adding bacteria back into that water line, there's no residual in there that's fighting what's coming into that water line. So you may have great water coming in and then it just goes to heck when it goes down into the water line because you don't have a chlorine or you don't have a hydrogen peroxide, or you don't have something that's hanging out in that water to fight what the birds are adding every time they get a drink.
Good point.
Residual's important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we forget about that. And UV light is the same way. UV
Right.
light actually works pretty good for what's coming in, but you've got no residual down the line to fight what those birds are really adding.
Yeah, we see that in a lot of different places besides just water lines. We look at it in hatcheries and other places as well. We can get it clean real quick with some things, but there's nothing that keeps it clean. So it's great point. Any other questions?
Can I ask one?
No?
Sure.
Oh, come on.
Okay, I have a backyard flock and I have two questions. One, we had a mineral test done just for our drinking water. How does the test that is for humans that you get done by the county different than ones for birds? And then I have one other short question.
Okay, so the difference in those two is that for humans, they err on the side of caution, and the levels are a lot lower. There are actually regulated layers, levels set for human consumption.
Right.
We don't have regulated levels for agriculture. So the groups, the universities that have dealt with agriculture have kind of compiled their own as to where they start to see health problems with the animals themselves.
Well, like you said, I got the results back. It was like 3 or 4 pages and I went, huh? And then the bottom line was, you're good. And I went, okay, fine. Because I was concerned about nitrates. Now, my second question is, our chickens don't get our well water, not usually. They get rainwater. How concerned should I be with rainwater that sits in a 55-gallon plastic or aluminum garbage can?
So the concern with rainwater would just be what it is doing as it sits in that barrel. So I would just worry about making sure that you've got either a certain level of parts per million of chlorine or a certain level parts per million of hydrogen peroxide in there.
Okay.
And because you don't want algae, you still got spores and stuff in that rainwater. And if it's used immediately, that's usually not a problem. But if
Every
it's,
couple of months, I'll dump it and then let it fill up. But I was wondering about the chlorine. Okay.
yeah, so what you probably want to hit is maybe 1 to 3 parts per million chlorine in there. And you can get little chlorine sticks measuring that you can measure. You can get those on it.
Yeah.
There's several ways to
In
measure
there.
that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
For about 3 parts and you'll be all right.
Okay, thanks. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see y'all. These are great questions. I love it.
And Joanne, I was just teasing you. You're always allowed to ask questions.
Just checking.
Backyard flocks make me sweat. Somebody says they got a backyard flock, and I'm like, whoo, okay, let's see if we can handle it.
They're fun. They're a lot more colorful.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, I love them.
Any other questions or comments, or maybe something that, works on your farm that you might want to share with the group?
I have a quick question, and it's a question I've been asked that I don't really know how to answer. Some growers, we've encouraged them to try to acidify the water, and they may use like a PWT. In some cases, they may use PLT, just trying to save a little bit of money. Some of those products do have some additional salt in them, sodium. Is there a concern about, like, can you, the goal might be to get like that 5.5 range or somewhere in there. Can you get yourself into a jam in terms of getting too much sodium in the water with those products, or like?
Yeah, so when Georgie has a question, I really start to sweat. If you don't know the answer, I get worried about mine. I haven't seen a problem with it. They kind of know their limit. They know what they're using their products for. PWT especially, we'll just pick them. They know what that product's being used for. And so they do know what the limits are and how much salt is going to be added into that system. I don't know that they intend for their products to be used at a pH of 2 or 3. I have had people that want to drop to a pH of 3. I don't get it, but for some reason they are on a bend to do that. So I can't answer for pH of 2 or 3, but in the range that those products are meant to use, which is usually about a 5 or 6, I think that they are well aware of what the salt levels are. I wouldn't be too concerned about that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Boy, a lot of crickets out there.
I don't know. They've been pretty active. That's some great questions. I'm very happy with that.
We can always go to the weather if we run out of other topics.
Well, I'm just going to, before we lose anybody, I want to bring up that March 3rd, we're going to have the Elanco insect control talk. And I don't know if Georgie, did you want to bring up anything about an investigator or anything?
About what?
That
Anything going on?
Well,
Well, I guess, I think the women in ag stuff will be coming up. I don't know if Jenny wants to mention that. I know I'm doing some educational stuff with kids through Zoom meetings on online, but if anybody's interested, I've got those posted on Facebook and they are public. So you don't have to be friends with me if you want to see what I'm telling young people about the way we grow chickens and what's important to us. So if you want to check that out, please feel free to do so. But I don't know that I have any upcoming things that are exciting to share.
Oh, I guess there was an investigator trying to get in touch with somebody. I don't know.
You're talking about the one where the investigator from DC is calling farmers.
Yes, we need to talk about that.
Yeah.
Whether you want to bring that up or not. So, okay.
Yes.
Just a reminder.
John, you got that email?
I don't have that email.
Hold on, let me see if I can find it.
And I don't even know what you're talking about. So
I thought it came from Jane.
what am I gonna investigate it for?
Basically, there's an investigator that's calling around to farmers and trying to find out what they're doing, what antibiotics they're using, what's going on their farm. They're trying to I don't know what they're trying to do or anything, but this person has a reputation of getting information and going after big companies. It's out of the DC area, if I remember right. I'm just going off my memory.
Yeah, Jonathan Abate is his name. He's a New York State licensed private investigator. And he's calling people, for example, let's see, well, he's done other investigations, but he's asking them, questions like, do you use antibiotics? And he says he is very misleading and misrepresenting maybe some of the questions that he's asking. And
he's one of these that goes after lawsuits for label misrepresentation, which my opinion, go after the soup that keeps saying there's no hormone or steroids in our soup. There is naturally, it's there everywhere.
Yeah, so just be careful of, people that call and start, asking questions, or the same thing, people that come on your farm and, you don't know who they are, same thing.
And one thing I just want to mention, just to be clear, that, I try to really share with folks, and there are hormones that occur naturally in any living organism, but we are not giving these birds any additional hormones or steroids or anything like that. And as poultry growers, we need to be clear on that we know that.
Yeah.
You can state that as a fact. But then also too, that, these birds are getting less and less antibiotics than they ever did. There are many growers now that are no antibiotics ever. And even if you have a flock that had antibiotics, those birds will be withdrawn from that antibiotic. And so even whether the package says it or not at the grocery store, all those chickens that are commercially grown and processed are antibiotic free. And as chicken growers, we need to, that's like, if anybody questions us
Baseline.
on that, we need to know that's a fact.
When they're pulling those fat pads, they're checking for all that. All that stuff's checked for. But again, one more meeting. We do have April 7th. We're going to have Connie Mao she's now with Jones Hamilton. She was the grad student that worked with down at Georgia that did a lot of work with Mike Zarek and Brian Fairchild. So.
And we have the Women in Ag Conference, not just for women, men can attend too. It's February the 12th. It's going to be a shortened version. This is our 20th year of the Women in Ag Conference, usually held at the Dover Downs Hotel and Casino, but it'll be from 8 to 11:30. We're going to have Lori Walensky give a kind of an update of 20 years of Women in Ag, and then we're going to have Michelle Payne come in. Some of you may follow her on some of the social media, but she does a lot with food bullying and all, but she's really going to talk to us about the resiliency of agriculture and really celebrating agriculture. And then we'll do a little break and we'll have some breakout rooms. And then Susan Gary, who's the Kent County Extension Director and Extension Agent of Animal Science in Delaware, she is going to talk about her Nuffield adventures, kind of like Georgie did with us a couple of years ago. And then we'll have wrap up. We will have a few door prizes, some things that we can mail, but we're doing the best we can. And, in times that we can't get together, Shannon and I are very disappointed that we can't get together and celebrate 20 years. But anybody that does register, we will be sending them out like a little token of our 20th year.
How do you register?
You have to go to extension.umd.edu. You can search Women in Ag, and you'll see the conference there, and you can register.
All right. Everything else good? Anything new, Maureen?
On DPI.
And you're muted, so this is great. We keep, every time she hits unmute, somebody mute.
Oh my God, I'm sorry. That was a challenge. That was a real challenge. I was clicking on it and then the thing was going away. Mary did such a good job. I'm just going to remain silent and don't pass out, John.
I'm sitting down. I'm okay.
Oh, very good.
I just put the Women in Ag Conference. If anybody wants, you can click right on that. It'll take you to the webpage to register.
Thanks, Jenny.
Great.
Thank you. Awesome.
Thank you,
Well,
Mary.
Mary, thank you so much. Since it's gone real quiet, I guess we'll go ahead and end at this time. Sheila, if you want to stop recording, we'll stop recording. But thanks again, Mary.